Hey guys, I wasn't going to do this, but I decided I needed to take some time and a few minutes to talk through some things, especially for anyone who's new here, because I think things have gotten lost in translation in my latest post. So if you're new to my page, my name is Destiny. I run Riverside Farms, and alongside my breeding program, I operate an in-house genetics lab, and I breed silkies. I do, and I breed lots of other breeds. But my specialties are silkies and calducks, and included in those, I breed paint and mottled silkies. And I want to be very clear, I've been working with mottled silkies for several years now, so I'm not new to this, and I've had paints for almost a decade. I do genetically test my breeding birds. I don't just label birds based on appearance alone. I test to see if my birds are carriers, non-carriers, hetero, because I have this capability, so I do it. It helps me eliminate guesswork. It improves my breeding program and helps make better decisions. And I want to be very clear right up front. I'm always open to respectful, science-based discussions. This post isn't about arguing, calling people out, or tearing anyone down. It's about the accuracy and the science, and about all of us having better information to work with. So let's talk about the mottled, because that's why most of you are here. In my original post, I said mottled silkies have become really popular lately. And honestly, this happens anytime a color gets popular. We see misinformation start to creep in, and I've basically been told I know nothing. So what I specifically was addressing was black birds being mislabeled as split to mottled while showing white, and mottled birds being mislabeled as black split to mottled. And that's not a judgment on anyone. It's an observation, and it's exactly why I said it's important that we understand the genetics behind the mottling gene. Because genetically, mottled is actually very straightforward. The mottled gene is an autosomal recessive trait, and that's not just something that's written in old poultry books. That is actually supported by controlled breeding studies that have been done and modern molecular research, including several peer-reviewed work indexes through sources like NIH and other scientific databases. So what does recessive actually mean in these birds? Well, it means a bird needs 2 copies to visually express the mottling, and if a bird only has 1 copy, that bird is considered heterozygous, and it is a split genetically. And it is not expected to show mottling. It's not expected. And that's why I broke it down the way I did, where homozygous mottled is visually mottled, heterozygous split is solid, and then non-colors are solid. So, if a black silky is genetically heterozygous, should it be showing mottling? No, it shouldn't, regardless of age, regardless of gender. Now, I also really want to touch base about the hens real quick, because this is where I see a lot of confusion and where things start to get a little argued about. Mottled hens do express mottling when they are homozygous, but pullets often start out with lighter or finer mottling, so it can be hard to tell. And cockerels tend to develop that bold white tip. And as hens go through their molts, their mottling becomes more obvious through molt. And so when someone sees a lightly mottled hen and assumes she's a split, my question always is based on what? Because genetically, that conclusion just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up genetically. So this also ties into another thing people ask about a lot, is why mottled silkies often end up with their white heads. And that white head isn't a separate gene turning on. It isn't exchequer doing something different. It's the mottled mechanism itself. The mottled gene works by interrupting melanocyte survival and function during feather development. And the head and crest are especially sensitive areas. Crest feathers are finer, they grow faster, and this means they're replaced more often due to the normal wear that happens. And so each molt gives another opportunity for those melanocytes to fail, basically, to populate those follicles. And this, over time, causes pigment loss, and that compounds there, which is why the head goes fully white before the rest of the body does. And that's actually a true mottled bird trait. That's not split expression. And then there's feather wear, sun bleaching, feather damage, and we've all seen black birds with light or frayed tips. That's not mottling, and it does not indicate the mottled genotype. Now, We can talk about what everyone keeps harping on is the split expression. And what people are labeling as split expression, in my opinion, is not the mottled gene expressing. It's actually other white affecting genes or modifiers or developmental variation or even environmental factors that are influencing this pigment deposition. In many modern lines, mottled birds are often on extended black backgrounds, well, at least mine are, which makes any pigment disruption even more obvious, but that does not change how this mottled gene itself is inherited. So, yes, solid black birds can occasionally throw a stray white or pale feather, but that doesn't mean mottled suddenly is becoming incomplete dominant. And there's no peer-reviewed research or research at all or studies that support this idea. And if you can find them, then show them to me. And this is exactly why splits should technically not be showing true mottling. The mottled gene is recessive. It requires 2 copies to interrupt the pigment in a patterned, inheritable way. So a heterozygous bird simply just doesn't technically have the mechanism to do that. So if you're seeing white on a split bird, the real question here is, where is this white actually coming from? Because genetically, it should not be coming from the mottled allele. It just shouldn't. And so I also really want to touch briefly on exchequer, because that term's getting thrown around a lot. And there's a lot of genetic work going back decades that has actually shown that pied, mottled, exchequer type feather patterns are all derived from the recessive locus, mottled, and not from a separate dominant or heterozygous state. For example, Carefoot's work crossing exchequer and other mottled / pied lines has demonstrated that these patterns integrate into the mottled gene, and Soames' foundational research really verified that the mottled genes is recessive inheritance. That tells us that exchequer isn't a heterozygous form of mottled. It's actually a variation of the mottled phenotype, and I can send you any of that information you want. And then here's the real question that really settles this for me in my mind. If splits truly expressed true mottling, we would have to see consistent inheritable white, heterozygous solid crosses. But we don't. We see solid offspring all the time. And it's exactly what you would expect from the recessive gene and exactly what the research actually predicts. And this is why I genetically test my birds, because I have that capability. And honestly, I would love to see more breeders do the same if it's possible for you, or at least rely on more careful record keeping or intentional test breeding, because visually interpreting what a bird looks like is not a reliable way to determine what it is genetically, especially with complex traits like mottling. It's not. So to be very clear, I'm not here for drama. I'm here for the accurate information and productive discussions. And if someone wants to have a respectful, evidence-based conversation about genetics, I'm always open to that. Provide your resources. Show me. Don't just talk. But anecdotes don't really override the genetics, and visual exceptions don't redefine inheritance. So this post is really, and this video, were about helping people make clearer, more informed breeding decisions. And that was it. That was all it was about. It wasn't to start drama.